You know that feeling when you're standing in a room full of people who call themselves family, yet somehow you're the only one who doesn't belong? That moment when everyone else has a place, a purpose, a seat, and you're just there. That was me at my father-in-law's retirement party. I was standing beside my wife, Tessa, feeling like maybe this time would be different. So I tried to join the conversation, tried to show I cared, and I casually said I'd bring dessert for the family barbecue they were planning. Tessa laughed like I'd told the funniest joke of the night. Then she said the words that made my stomach drop. "Oh, Silas, you weren't invited." Her sister Blair didn't even try to hide how amused she was. She held up her phone and showed me the seating charts, speeches, and schedule. Everything planned down to the minute. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a place. Everyone but me. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded, pretending it didn't crush me, and stepped out quietly. On my way to the car, I canceled the entire venue they were planning to use. Yes, the one I had secretly paid for. The deposit, the catering, the equipment, all of it. They hadn't even remembered I was the one footing the bill. I canceled it all before I even left the parking lot. Please stay with me while I tell the rest, because this story isn't just about a barbecue or an invitation. It's about 6 years of being treated like a shadow in my own marriage. It's about standing next to people who claimed they cared, while they only cared about what I could provide. It's about the kind of revenge that doesn't come from anger, but from finally waking up. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing. My name is Silas Vance, and I married into the Thorne family, a family where money and appearances matter more than kindness. They were the type who used polished smiles as weapons and believed their last name was some kind of crown. From the beginning, I tried to prove myself. I fixed their broken fence, paid for last-minute decorations, handled emergencies, and picked up bills that weren't mine. I told myself that if I kept showing up, eventually they'd see me as part of the family. But the truth is, they only saw me when they needed something. I was the reliable one, the helper, the quiet guy who had answers and solutions. Useful but forgettable. Present but invisible. For 6 long years, I convinced myself that love meant patience. That family meant compromise. That one day, they would finally make space for me at their table. But standing there at that party, listening to my wife laugh about excluding me, something inside me finally shifted. I realized I had spent years trying to earn a place with people who never wanted me there. And for the first time, I felt the calm, steady beginning of a choice, one that would change everything. I reached the Oak Crest Country Club earlier than anyone else, just like I always did. While the staff were still setting up, I was already walking around the hall, making sure nothing went wrong. I checked the projector, tested the mic, fixed a light that kept flickering, and arranged the chairs so everything looked perfect. No one asked me to do it, but I did it anyway because that was my role in the Thorne family. Stay useful, stay quiet, stay out of the way. When people started arriving, I stepped aside and let them have their moment. Everyone greeted each other loudly, hugging and laughing like a big warm family. I tried joining a few conversations, but I only got quick nods and short answers before they moved on to someone more important. Tessa blended into the crowd easily, charming everyone. I just stayed near the edges, watching. Later, when it was time for speeches, I raised my glass and shared a simple, honest toast for my father-in-law. I meant every word, but most people barely reacted. A few clapped, others kept talking, and it felt like my voice disappeared into the noise. I stood there holding my glass, pretending it didn't bother me, but deep down I felt that familiar sting. After the speeches, I went to look at the seating charts. I only wanted to know where I was supposed to sit for dinner. I scanned the names calmly, table by table. But my name wasn't anywhere. Not at the family table. Not near the back. Not even on a spare chair. I checked again, slower, thinking maybe I missed it. But it wasn't there. It was like I wasn't part of the night at all. That moment hit me hard. I had worked all afternoon to make this party run smoothly, and still, I wasn't considered part of the group. I just stood there staring at the list, trying to understand how I could be physically present but completely forgotten. I walked away before anyone noticed the look on my face. I needed space to breathe. On my way toward the patio doors, I passed a group of relatives talking excitedly about the big family barbecue happening the next day. They talked about food plans, who was bringing drinks, and what time they'd meet. I listened carefully. My name never came up. Everyone else had a role. Everyone had a spot. Everyone had a plan. Except me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there quietly, feeling something inside me settle in a way I couldn't ignore. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was understanding. A simple, painful realization that no matter how much I did, I wasn't truly part of their family. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Music, dancing, pictures I wasn't asked to join. I went through the motions, helping when needed, smiling when expected, but inside something had shifted. I felt myself finally seeing the truth I'd been avoiding for years. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I was standing near a small group of relatives, trying to look like I belonged there. They were laughing about the plans for the next day, and even though no one had spoken to me directly, I tried to stay positive. I told myself maybe things weren't as bad as they felt. Maybe I had simply been left out of the earlier conversations. So I took a small step forward and said, with the best smile I could manage, "I can bring dessert for the family barbecue tomorrow. I know that bakery you all love." The moment the words left my mouth, the entire group went quiet. Their smiles faded at the same time, like someone had pressed a mute button. Eyes shifted. A few people looked away like they suddenly needed to check their phones. I didn't understand why at first. I thought maybe they didn't hear me, or maybe I'd interrupted something important. Then Tessa turned toward me. The look on her face wasn't anger, or even embarrassment. It was pity. A soft, almost amused pity that made my stomach sink. She tilted her head slightly, gave me a small smirk, and said in a light, almost gentle voice, "Oh, Silas, you weren't invited." Her words hit harder than they sounded. She said it like it was obvious, like I should have known better. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay still, not show how much it hurt. For a second, I hoped maybe she meant it differently. Maybe she meant someone forgot to tell me. Maybe she meant there was some misunderstanding. But Blair cleared that up fast. She stepped forward, her smirk sharper than Tessa's. She held up her phone and turned the screen toward me. "We already made all the plans," she said, sounding proud of it. On the screen were full details, who was bringing what time everyone needed to be there, speeches, games, a whole schedule for group photos. Every name was listed. Every activity was written out clearly. And I wasn't part of any of it. Blair added, almost cheerfully, "It's kind of a close family thing." The message was clear. I wasn't close family. Not to them. Not even to my own wife's side of the family. I stood there staring at the screen, pretending it didn't bother me as much as it did. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, though I didn't trust myself enough to speak. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was how casually they said it, as if it didn't matter whether I was there or not. People around us tried to act normal again, but the moment hung in the air. I could feel eyes on me, not with sympathy, but with curiosity, like they were waiting to see how I would react. But I didn't give them anything. I just stepped back, gave a small smile that felt stiff on my face, and let the conversation move on without me. Inside, though, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap that told me things would never feel the same again. I stood there after Tessa and Blair finished talking, feeling something inside me go completely still. I wasn't angry anymore. The shock of their words had drained everything out of me. It felt like someone had wiped the last bit of hope off a board I had been writing on for years. I didn't ask questions. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to explain how much it hurt. I just nodded like their words meant nothing and gently placed my drink on the nearest table. Nobody followed me. Nobody asked if I was okay. I walked out of the hall at a steady pace, not rushing, not shaking. I didn't even look back. The night air outside felt colder than normal, but it helped me think clearly. Every step toward my car felt like I was leaving something behind, something I should have let go of a long time ago. When I got in the car, I didn't slam the door or hit the steering wheel. I just sat in silence. There was no loud anger, no crying, nothing dramatic. Just a calm, empty quiet that settled in like a heavy blanket. I realized I had spent years trying to be part of people who didn't see me. And now that I had seen the truth without excuses, it felt strangely simple. The drive home was almost peaceful. Streetlights passed by the windows like slow, steady blinks. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I let the quiet do its work. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to convince myself things would get better. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to be useful. I was just done. When I reached home, I didn't pace around or replay the scene in my head. I already knew what I needed to do. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone, and opened the email with the reservation details for the expensive pavilion they were planning to use for their perfect barbecue. I had booked it weeks ago, paid for it in full, chose the best caterer in the area, added a sound system, and even the bouncy Castle Blair insisted her kids absolutely needed. All of it was in my name. All of it was tied to my card. My thumb hovered over the cancel button for only a second. Not because I hesitated, but because I wanted that moment to stay with me. A moment when I finally chose myself. Then I pressed cancel. One by one, I removed everything. The catering order vanished. The equipment rental was gone. The bouncy castle disappeared from the list. I didn't care about losing the deposit, not even a little. Losing money hurt less than losing dignity. When the last confirmation email came through, I felt a strange kind of relief. A clear, quiet satisfaction. I set my phone down and stretched out on the bed. There was no guilt, no second-guessing. Just a steady, calm feeling that told me I had finally taken my power back in the only way that felt right. That night, I slept deeply, deeper than I had in years. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely rested. There was no heaviness in my chest, no worry about how the day would go. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the sun come up. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel rushed or tense. I just sat there quietly, letting the warmth of the mug settle into my hands. My phone buzzed on the table, but I ignored it at first. I thought it was a random notification or some useless alert. But then it buzzed again. And again. And again. The screen lit up non-stop, messages piling in one after another. I finally picked it up. The first text was from Tessa. "Silas, what did you do?" Before I could even process that, more messages popped up. Her mother wrote, "We are at the park and there is nothing here. This is unacceptable." A second message followed from her, even sharper. "Fix this immediately." Then Blair jumped in, sending a long string of irritated texts back to back. "Are you serious right now? You're being a child. You're ruining the entire event. What kind of person does this?" I scrolled through the messages slowly, sipping my coffee. None of their words surprised me. They were exactly what I expected. Anger without accountability, complaints without a second of reflection. They weren't upset because something went wrong. They were upset because they couldn't control me the way they always had. I didn't type a single word in response. I didn't tell them why I did it. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I placed my phone back on the table and took another calm sip of coffee. Silence, which had once been something I hid behind, now felt like something I could use. Every time the phone buzzed, it reminded me that they were panicking while I sat in peace. Tessa kept calling. First one call, then another, then 5 more. I let every call ring until it stopped. Her voice messages came next, short, frantic recordings where she tried switching between anger and guilt. One moment she accused me of embarrassing the whole family. The next she begged me to come fix their mess. She sounded more frustrated with every message. Eleanor's tone in her voice notes was different. She spoke like I was an employee who had failed to show up for work. "This isn't how responsible adults behave," she lectured. "You should have informed us if there was an issue." Not once did she acknowledge that they hadn't informed me about the barbecue at all. Blair's messages, on the other hand, were full of insults. She blamed me for everything falling apart, calling me dramatic, selfish, childish. Words she threw out as if they would push me back into my old quiet role. But nothing they said affected me. I sat there, finishing my coffee, letting the noise from my phone fade into the background. My silence was no longer a sign of weakness. It wasn't a surrender or a fear of conflict. It was a choice. A simple decision not to give them any part of me anymore. As the messages kept piling up, I watched them with a steady, almost cold calm. And somewhere inside, a small, tight smile formed. For the first time, they were the ones scrambling, not me. I heard the front door slam, so hard the frame shook. I didn't even need to look up to know it was Tessa. Her footsteps came fast and sharp down the hallway, and she burst into the living room with her face red and her hands shaking. She didn't bother with a greeting. "You humiliated us," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the room, but I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch with a calmness that surprised even me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't jump to explain myself. I just looked at her and said, "I wasn't invited." She blinked, almost startled by how steady I sounded. Then she threw up her hands like I was being unreasonable. "That's not how families handle things," she snapped. I let those words hang in the air for a second. They sounded so empty, so ironic, coming from someone who stood by while her own husband was cut out of a family event. Finally, I said quietly, "Good thing I'm not family then." She froze. It was like she didn't expect me to say that out loud. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She seemed confused, not because she didn't understand the words, but because she didn't like the truth behind them. Before she could start yelling again, I reached for the folder I had placed on the coffee table earlier. I had printed the receipts that morning, not out of pettiness, but because I wanted everything to be clear. I slid the papers toward her. "These are the reservations," I said. "Everything your family planned to use today." Her eyes dropped to the documents. My name was printed on every page: booking confirmations, payment receipts, deposits, add-ons. Pages showing my card numbers, my signature, my contact information. All of it connected to me. All of it used for an event I wasn't even told about. She stared at the papers for a long moment. The anger in her expression cracked, and something else took its place, a mix of shock and guilt she tried hard to hide. She finally realized the truth that had always been there. They were perfectly comfortable benefiting from me, as long as I stayed quiet and out of sight. She swallowed hard. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice losing its force. I shook my head. I didn't have to do any of it. But I did. Every year. Every gathering. Every plan your family expected me to pay for. And I never asked for anything but respect. She looked away, her eyes darting to the window, the floor, anywhere except me. For once, she didn't have a clever excuse or a way to twist the situation. She couldn't deny that I had been treated like a wallet instead of a partner. "You blindsided everyone," she whispered. I stood up, keeping my voice steady. "No, you blindsided me. I just stopped pretending it didn't matter." Those words sank into the room like a stone dropping into water. She didn't argue again. She didn't apologize either. She only stood there, breathing hard, her pride wounded but her conscience exposed. For the first time since we married, I felt like she finally saw the real impact of her choices, and the man who was done absorbing them. After the confrontation with Tessa, I thought the storm would finally settle, but the fallout had only begun. I stayed home that day, letting the quiet of my apartment absorb the tension. My phone kept buzzing, but this time, it wasn't just texts from Tessa or Blair. It was messages, notifications, and comments from people connected to the Thorne family. I didn't scroll through them all. I didn't need to. I heard about it through a friend. They were posting pictures online, perfectly staged shots from the barbecue, smiles forced, captions designed to make it look like nothing had happened. Their social media was a show, and I was the villain in the story they wanted the world to see. Blair went further than I expected. She started sending private messages to my acquaintances, painting me as dramatic, selfish, and impossible to deal with. People I barely knew called me, asking what had happened, repeating what they had seen or heard from her. I didn't respond to anyone. I didn't explain myself. I let them talk, knowing the truth was mine and theirs was just noise. Every attempt to twist reality felt like proof of how they really operated, how they controlled the narrative, even when it was false. For days I stayed calm. I watched the chaos unfold without stepping in. And then something unexpected happened. A message popped up from Jonah, Tessa's younger brother, the one who had always been quietly observant, often in the background. I almost didn't open it, unsure what he would say after all the stories swirling around. "Hey, I heard what happened. That was messed up. You didn't deserve that," it read. I stared at the screen for a long moment. No smirk, no judgment, no twisting of facts, just honesty. Just acknowledgement. From inside the fortress of the Thorne family, one person saw the truth. One person recognized that what I had experienced wasn't my fault. And in that recognition, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. It was a small thing, a simple gesture, but it validated everything I had felt, every moment of hurt and frustration, every quiet effort I had made to be seen. I typed back a short thank you, nothing long or emotional, just enough to let him know I appreciated it. The rest of the messages, the chaos, the smear attempts, they didn't matter anymore. One person's honesty had cut through it all, giving me clarity. It reminded me that not everyone in that family was blind or cruel. That even in the middle of betrayal, there were glimpses of support. For the first time in a long while, I felt less alone. I realized that even when the people closest to you fail to see your value, there are still unexpected allies. Jonah's small act of acknowledgement reminded me that I could step away from the drama without losing everything. I could rebuild. I could start over, with clarity, dignity, and someone who truly understood. It was a small spark, but sometimes all you need is one light in the darkness to know the way forward. Tessa showed up at my apartment a few days later, her face a mix of frustration and forced calm. She tried to explain herself, her voice carrying the kind of excuses I had heard from her family 100 times before. Blair planned everything, and Mom, well, you know how they are. I didn't fight it, Silas. I tried, she said, her tone soft but distant, as if she expected me to understand and forgive immediately. I listened without interrupting, my hands folded in my lap. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend the years I had quietly given to her family, but I realized I didn't need to. I wasn't going to let her words pull me back into the cycle I had already broken free from. She stepped closer, trying to offer some kind of peace. Look, you can come to the next family gathering, she said, almost cheerfully, as if that could undo everything that had happened. I shook my head slowly, feeling a clarity I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Her words, her excuses, her invitation. It was all just a reminder of the same patterns that had left me invisible for years. I had spent too long trying to earn a place at a table where I would never truly belong. I realized that being tolerated, being grudgingly included, was not enough. I didn't want to live in a world where my presence was optional and my value was measured only by what I could provide. I looked her straight in the eyes, my voice steady. I don't want to be tolerated, Tessa. I want to be chosen. And you never have. The words were heavy, but they felt necessary. They carried years of quiet disappointment, months of humiliation, and decades of subtle neglect. For a moment, she looked at me, startled, like she had never expected me to speak with such certainty. I didn't wait for her to respond. I had made my decision the moment I realized that staying meant sacrificing myself again. I turned away and walked to the bedroom, where I had already packed a few essentials. Clothes, toiletries, important documents. Everything I would need to start over without relying on anyone who had made me feel less than I was. The apartment I had found wasn't fancy, but it was mine. It smelled faintly of fresh paint. The windows let in enough light to make the space feel warm. And for the first time in years, it was quiet. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities. Full of space to think, to breathe, and to finally prioritize myself. I didn't look back. I didn't call after her. The life I had known, filled with conditional love and constant compromise, was over. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I was free from the games, the judgments, and the constant need to prove my worth to people who never truly valued me. In the quiet of my new apartment, I realized that walking away wasn't just leaving Tessa behind. It was stepping into a life where I finally mattered. And that mattered more than anything else. Weeks after I moved out, I started hearing bits and pieces about the so-called rescheduled family barbecue. At first, I didn't care. I had left all of it behind, the arguments, the events, the endless pressure to perform. But messages and casual comments from mutual friends kept filtering in. Curiosity mixed with a quiet sense of vindication, so I began paying attention. What I learned didn't surprise me, but it felt satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. The event had been moved to a smaller, cheaper park because no one wanted to cover the costs themselves. Vendors they had planned to hire either canceled or didn't show, and the food they had carefully ordered arrived late or spoiled in the sun. The decorations looked half-finished. The bouncy castle, which had been a major point of pride for Blair, never arrived. Parents and children alike were disappointed, and the carefully curated photos online could not hide the chaos. Hearing about all of it, I realized that every detail that had once depended on me, the smooth flow, the timing, the logistics, the money, was now completely undone. They had thought the family's image and events could survive without my involvement. They were wrong. The perfection they prided themselves on had collapsed under their own hands, and no amount of excuses could cover it. For months, I watched quietly as their social media bragging turned into awkward explanations, forced smiles, and frantic attempts to spin the disaster into something harmless. Blair sent a few half-hearted apologies to friends and family, but it was clear she was frustrated more by the damage to her reputation than any recognition of what really caused it. Tessa tried to explain it all away, blaming timing, bad luck, or minor miscommunications, but the truth was obvious. Without me, the family's plans had fallen apart. I felt a strange peace as I followed the stories. There was no gloating, no desire to intervene, no need to prove anything. The realization that they hadn't missed me, the person I was, but the contributions I had made hit me like a quiet punch. They missed my money, my time, my organization. They missed the invisible work I had done to keep their world looking perfect. Their disappointment, frustration, and embarrassment were theirs to own, and I didn't have to carry any of it. Sitting in my new apartment, I reflected on the years I had poured into a family that never truly included me. Now I was free from it all. I had my own space, my own routines, and people around me who genuinely appreciated my presence, not just my contributions. Watching the thorns stumble through their own chaos, I realized something important. I had already won. Their mistakes were not my responsibility. Their image had crumbled, but mine had never been more intact. I finally understood the difference between being needed and being wanted. And for the first time in a long while, I felt complete peace, knowing I had removed myself from a world that had never truly valued me. Months passed, and my apartment, small and unpretentious, slowly started feeling like home. One evening, I decided to host a gathering. Not fancy, not planned to impress anyone, but a real chance to share space with people who mattered. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need matching chairs or expensive food. I wanted connection, warmth, and honesty. I invited Jonah and his wife. They had been my quiet support throughout everything, the one link to someone in the Thorne family who actually understood. I asked a friend from work, someone who had always been there without judgment, and a neighbor who had helped me move boxes and never asked for anything in return. They all said yes without hesitation. The food was simple: homemade pasta, a salad, and a few baked goods. It didn't matter. The smell of it, combined with the chatter and laughter, filled the apartment in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The chairs didn't match, and the tablecloth was a patchwork of old linens I'd gathered, but the space felt alive. A small handmade card, glitter smudged and corners bent, rested in the center. It was from a child I had helped tutor over the summer, and somehow, it became the most important decoration in the room. As people arrived, the energy shifted. No one was pretending. No one was trying to show off. We laughed over stories from work, small victories, shared jokes, and little mistakes from our daily lives. Jonah teased me about my cooking. My neighbor brought an extra dessert, and the friend from work offered a toast that made me realize how much they appreciated having me in their lives. It wasn't about appearances. It was about presence. I looked around at the people gathered, their smiles genuine, their attention focused on one another, not a curated image. I realized I had done something extraordinary in the simplest way. I had built a family I could belong to. People who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. For the first time in years, I felt completely at ease. No one ignored me, no one excluded me, no one pretended I didn't matter. I wasn't just sitting at the table. I had a seat at the head of it. And it wasn't because I had forced my way there or paid for it. It was because these people wanted me there. In that small, imperfect apartment, I understood what true family meant. Not the blood or the expectations, but the love, respect, and presence of people who see you fully. I had walked away from rejection, humiliation, and false perfection. And I had created something real, something lasting. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and warmth, I finally felt at home. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from my wife and her family? Or should I have tried one more time? I really want to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.